Mr. Raaja Bhasin, to kindly please join us on the stage. He'll be in conversation with Gillian Wright, distinguished writer, translator, and cultural historian, whose deep understanding of India's linguistic and literary landscape makes her the perfect voice to guide the exchange. Ma'am, I would request you to kindly please join us on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a round of applause for the next session, Echoes of Heritage, Myths and Culture in Himachal Pradesh. The stage is all yours. Thank you.
Sat Sri Akal, good morning, namaskar, aadab arz hai. It's lovely to be here this morning, well, it's now this afternoon, and to have traveled here looking at 180 degrees of perfect snows, beautiful green hillsides, and to have been woken in the morning by the sound of the whistling thrush and by the mad bubble and squeaking of Khalij pheasants and the elfin calls of the grey-hooded warbler, amongst many others. And we can forget, seeing our beautiful surroundings, what a threatened ecosystem are the Himalayas, including Himachal, that we have already in Himachal got 1.5 degrees of warming, that glaciers are going, that across the whole Himalayan region, approximately half the natural springs have dried up or become seasonal. This is information from the head of ISIMOD, who was recently in Delhi. And when I arrived here yesterday, I spoke to a bada buddha, an old man, that I happened to find. And I said, "Kaisa ha barsat kaisa tha?" He said, "Jahan pahad sahi hai, sab bahut badhiya raha. Jahan इन्होंने छेड़छाड़ किया है पहाड़ों से, वहाँ गिर गए, वहाँ तबाही मची हुई है." So we're here today for a book which talks about this very heritage, the natural heritage of Himachal, at a very difficult time for all of the Himalayas, a very fragile time where our own development is making it even more fragile, is adding to the problems caused by climate change. Now this is a wonderful book. It's called Heritage Himachal, and it has wonderful illustrations. What Raaja Bhasin has done in this book, after becoming the chronicler of Himachal, of Shimla, is to become the chronicler of the whole of Himachal. उन्होंने समुंदर कूजे को में बंद कर दिया है और बहुत बढ़िया तरीके से है. इसमें इतनी कहानियाँ हैं, सब कुछ है. तो पहले मैं आपसे बताऊंगी, फिर बाद में हम आएंगे future के बारे and the fragility of our system. How did you come to write this book? And I may also add that this is a book produced also jointly by INTAC, but many INTAC books are like a listing and it's just going through the listing. This is a book of imagination and deep knowledge. So आपने कैसे decide, how did you decide to write this book in its form? How did you manage to do this?
Thank you, Gillian. First of all, let me digress for a moment. I'd like to say thank you to Khushwant Singh, the man who set me off on this path. I never met him, but there was a point of time when, simply to retain my sanity, I had started writing. The result of that was a book on my first book, which was on Simla. And he happened to be on the editorial as an editorial advisor to Penguin at that time. I'm talking about 100 years ago. And this book was shown, the manuscript was shown to him. It is his yes that has set me off on this path. And I'd also like to thank Rahul and Nilofer. I'm back here. I was here for the first festival, again, 100 years ago, and it's so wonderful seeing it grow. But this is a cycle which in many ways reflects, comes out in this book, comes out in some of my other writings. Most of this is first-hand observations. I have walked these hills, I have trekked in these hills, I have lived in village homes, I have heard stories from the people who have heard these stories over generations coming down in the villages, in their legends, in their mythology. And this has sort of, I have tried to create a merger between verifiable history, which has to be a clear-cut discipline, and also with the little rider, that this is a story. And we leave it at the story because stories are equally important for us.
I agree that Khushwant Singh was a man who loved to say yes. And he has encouraged so many writers. He's encouraged me. And we all owe our debt to him. And he was also a man who would love what you had written because he loved heritage. He loved his home in the hills. He wrote beautifully about his childhood home in Mashobra. And he loved nature. I think his book on Delhi's plants and trees and the seasons is one of the most outstanding of his books. So this is how you came to write the book, but it also has an incredible depth of knowledge about individual villages and the constructions and the plethora of built heritage there is.
So in this book, and which I've tried to do, we almost have is two fairly clear-cut forms of architecture that have emerged in these hills. I'm not talking about a lot of the rubbish which we are doing now, but earlier on, there was almost an organic growth to these houses. It was almost taking Gandhi's dictum that you took whatever was within a limited periphery of your house and you built with that. You built with mud, you built with stone, you built with wood. The interesting thing about these structures, the old Kathkuni, the old wattle and daub, the old lath and plaster structures of this area, is that, as we know, but we try to deny, the entire Himalayan zone is a tectonic zone. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when. We are going to have another shake-up. The last big earthquake which we had in this region was in April 1905. West of here, the Kangra area, it left a devastation and left at that point of time with sparse population, about 16,000 people died. It completely flattened the towns of Dharamsala, Palampur. The Kangra fort was destroyed. But these lath and plaster structures, they rode the earthquake. They wobbled, they shook, they rode the earthquake. Similarly, when the early colonial houses were built, they again used variations of this theme. It was again pulling out something from the European experience of architecture and transforming it and bringing it into this part of the world, using similar materials, mud, wood, stone. And for the early houses, the roofing was either of wood shingles or of later on by corrugated iron. And of course, there was gray slate. The interesting thing which has happened, and please, I would like to be corrected on this, to the best of my knowledge, in all the devastation which has taken place in the last few years, the landslides, the slippages, to the best of my knowledge, not a single traditional village home, there is not a single traditional colonial house which has been destroyed. Damaged, perhaps occasionally, yes, but all of these, they were built well, they were built with stability, they were built with an understanding of nature.
So the right home in the right place, just as you put the right tree in the right place.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just, we have houses, domestic houses, it's also religious places. The temples have the same sort of structure.
Many of the temples, because here again, there's a variation in the temples which we have in, well, let me just expand this a little bit. If we were to look at this region, the Western Himalaya, or the Western Himalaya as I prefer to call it, I like to use the word Himalaya in place of the word Himalayas, the anglicized version. Yeah. I use the very Sanskritized version, which is the original way it was written and spelled, Himalaya. Combination of two words, him and ale, loosely translating the home of snow. That's all it means. In this area, we divide it into four very clear geographic zones. We are sitting on the outer fringe, the Shivaliks, then come the mid-hills, the permanently snow-clad peaks, and then the Trans-Himalaya. Similarly, we can divide this region into three fairly clear-cut cultural zones. There is the outer fringe of the districts, which form today's administrative districts, Bilaspur, Kangra, Una, Hamirpur. which border Punjab and Haryana. There is a lot of what you would call mainline religion coming in. The mid-hills have a distinct form with local deities, what is commonly called the Dev Pratha. You have the local deities, these are living gods. These gods, they come awake, they are alive, or they come awake for 6 months of the year, and then they rest for 6 months every year. They move from village to village, they move from place to place where they have their sthans, their places of worship, and then they go back to what is called the Dyoti or the Devti, where the Devta rests for half the year. The interesting thing about the hill temples, these mid-hill temples, is unlike other temples, there is no murti, there is no image there all the time. Half the year the temple is locked. It's only when the Devta comes out of his place of rest is he goes to the temple and his worshippers come to him. These are living gods, what you would call living gods. I'll go up to them, hey buddy, I've got a problem, come and sort it out for me. This is, I will have a conversation with the person or the deity whom I worship. Then you move to the Trans-Himalaya, where the presence of Vajrayana Buddhism is again very strong. I've lived in a Vajrayana Buddhism monastery as a monk, again 100 years ago. It was an experience, and one drifted back.
And I must admit, one of the only times I've been to a proper occasion like you're describing is at the Sipi Mela near Mashobra, where you have the deity, and with the deity you have, it's not just the living deity, there's a whole social scene to the thing, and dance and music and displays with bows and arrows, and it, like you say, it's a living tradition.
It's a very powerful living tradition which remains to the present day. The deity, he comes out of his temple. The dances are there. There's a common dance which is called the Thoda, which is again supposedly is a mythological, goes back to the time when it displays the battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, going back to the Mahabharata with the local nuance. So you'll have the dancers swirling, and they'll wear heavy lagging and thick boots. And the idea is that the other side has to fire an arrow at one of the legs. The first one which draws blood is the winner. And there's another variation in another place, a little touch of this. Straight after Diwali, a few days after Diwali, there is another local mela called the Patron Ka Khel, where these two villagers have these two teams. They throw stones at each other. Again, when first blood is drawn, that is put as a mark, as a tilak on the deity. But back to Sipur, there's again the tradition is altering. Sipur, the local devta called Sip. This is where the overlayering of Sanskritization is also taking place. And the distinct identity of Sip is now being subsumed almost by that of Shiv. And the people, local people, refer to it as Sipur and as Shivpur. And when you ask that who is this Sip or is this Shiv? It is again the very Eastern dichotomy, it is both.
Ah, and I have to say that one of the most inspiring places that I have been to in Himachal are the rock-cut temples of Masroor, which are built in the most... how many people have been here, been to Masroor temples here? Not that many. So can you tell them about it and how it is so ancient and how it brings you back to a former day?
Masroor it's again, as Gillian mentioned, it's a rock-cut temple. It is the only rock-cut temple in North India. One reason why it remained protected and was not defaced or destroyed over the years was its complete isolation. It is in an isolated valley of Kangra, and it is a fairly isolated spot even today. It's an absolutely stunning sight. You have this gorgeous centuries-old temple. You have these low undulating hills. You have these fields, and in the distance, you have the permanently snow-clad Dauladhar mountains. The setting is absolutely magnificent. It's almost spiritual, without the temple even being there. The temple is now with the protection of the ASI, and it's an extraordinary temple because it's primarily a Vaishnav temple. But it is not just a Vaishnav temple. You have other deities in minor structures within the primary rock which exists to the present day. It was severely damaged in the earthquake of 1905, but what's there is there.
And there are, when you go to the earliest rock cut temples, you see these lovely rounded windows with people looking out. So it really takes you back over 1,000 years. I don't think there's anywhere else quite like that.
There isn't. And it's almost like there are these little portholes in the
and you're looking to that person, and that person has a face that is recognizably an individual.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, if we go from there to other structures, we have not just, you have different ways of getting around. We now have these highways which are built into mountains, and as I was saying recently, the Director General of ISIMOD, who looks into development in the whole Himalayan region with government support, was saying that we know how to build roads, but people are just sending, all over the region, sending in bulldozers, and we're doing it the wrong way. And do you have any suggestions for how we can move around better?
Let me come to a small anecdote. When my father was 7 years old, they lived in Lahore, Punjabi family, permanently settled in Lahore. His uncle, my grandfather's brother, was helping Satyanand Stokes set up a school in what is Kotgarh today. From Lahore, my father with his uncle, my dad was 7 years old at that time, they would come till first Kalka by train, then take the little train up to Simla. Then it took them 3 days of walking between Simla and Kotgarh. That's how long it took. So it was a combination of walking and riding on mules. So he says when one part of our body got sore, we would use the other. and we just kept moving on. At that time, and when we became independent in 1947, Himachal, as it stood territorially then, was about 22,000 kilometers. Kasoli, Simla, they were a part of Punjab. The total length of motorable road in the entire state at that point of time was 37 miles. That's all there was. And those 37 miles were also largely unconnected. Today we are close to 50,000 kilometers. There is one thing to be said about wanting, I am nobody to tell a villager who has to take his crop to the market to sell, who has somebody to go for medical aid, that no, you should not have a road, you should not have access. I'm nobody to say that. That man is entitled to a better life. Everybody is entitled to a better life. But that having been said, there was a way of doing it. What we call the great grand highways are not really geared so much for local people as for tourism. Today, there is a strong sense of displacement which is emerging in the hills, that as locals, we feel our towns are not being catering to us, they are catering to an economic drive which benefits a certain segment of society. That's not to say tourism should not be there. It's a primary driver of the economy. But again, a highway like this, let's look at the Kalka-Simla highway, which is right here, which we all use almost on a regular basis at least, is that the natural angle of repose in these hills, is 30 degrees. You can push it up to 45 degrees. Today we've got perpendicular cuttings going hundreds and hundreds of feet. You are going to have landslides. Those landslides are not going to go away. I give you one example, and this is again of something which I'd written for one of the Tribune's columns, of a landslide which took place in the Satluj in 1782, if I recall correctly, and which dammed the river Satluj for 42 days. The dam finally broke. There's another story to it. But today, 250 years later, you can still see where that landslide took place. It's still the scar on the mountain, the scar on the hillside is visible. These scars are not going to go away because for the one simple reason, it's been built wrong.
So any ilaj, any cure for this?
I would not claim to say something about which I know nothing about, but I can simply say You could have built it better, you could have built it smaller. And here there was a simple way on the Kalka-Simla, the old highway to Simla, which has gone into largely disuse, which went via Sabatu. It could have been simple. You leave this as a 2-lane, develop that as a double lane, make it a 1-way, and that's the end of it.
And it also, the highway has ended up putting in some danger the Kalka-Simla railway, which also merits a chapter in your book.
So, and one of the reasons why UNESCO, there were 2 reasons why UNESCO was revising its plans, because I worked very closely with the railways and I worked very closely with UNESCO when the heritage status was being given to the Kalka-Simla railway. I was seconded to the team which was talking about it. So I know a little bit about this. It's, again, presumed knowledge. But here, 2 things UNESCO said that we may take away World Heritage status from this railway. 1, you're threatening it. 2, the place is filthy.
All right, let's turn now from something a little so depressing and let's talk about, because this is an INTAC book also, and you've been involved with INTAC, I think, for many years?
I have, Gillian, yes.
Yeah. So the INTAC's had some successes. Can you tell us, for example, about the Gaiety Theatre?
Well, we've had, I would say, some small successes, some big successes, and it's an uphill task, but we'll keep on at it. The Gaiety Theatre's restoration was initiated by INTAC. Similarly, we've restored a couple of small temples. We've also, for what little it's worth, though again it's an uphill task, the designation of the Mall area in Shimla, which has been declared a heritage zone, that was also an INTAC initiative. We've been working on extensive listings. We've been working on actual restorations. But increasingly, we are now focusing on education, on teaching children the value of heritage, because at least in the hills, at least in this part of the world, it's one very simple thing. What is the USP of, say, Himachal, Uttaranchal, or this part of the world? Nature and its built heritage. Remove it, what are you left with? There's nothing very much you're left with after that. This is a core economic asset apart from everything else. And if you sort of, well, we're already hacking away at the poor thing's feet, but if you kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, you're stuck. That's all there is to it. Preserve it, because that is what's going to continue sustaining, continue giving this area what it has been nurturing down the centuries.
And which you have so ably put into one book. And it's the sort of book, as I can say, you just dip into it and you keep on reading, because there's story after story after story. And you realize how, at least I realize, how deeply ignorant I am. Now, I think we've had 1 bell. I don't know. I think we get 3 bells before we're dragged off the stage. 2 bells. In which case, I had better open it up to questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Raaja Bhasin? Yes, Jyoti.
This is a grilling.
First of all, thank you for being a columnist with the Tribune. Thank you, Mr. Bhasin.
I'm Jyoti Malhotra. My question to you is, we do a lot of stories in our newspaper about hotel, people in the hotel business, in the tourism business, who say that they want the roads and they want tourism, because otherwise, their businesses all. So, this chicken and egg, can you talk a little bit about it? And have a second question quickly. On the Devis and the Devtas, you talked about the deities, the living.
Now, there was this story about, there's
a lot of being written about caste and deities, and if you'd like to talk about that.
Well, Jyoti, first of all, thank you. It's a privilege writing for the Tribune and reaching a wonderful audience. Your first question, yes, if you put in a business, if you put in an investment, you naturally need the infrastructure to sustain that business. Otherwise, why would you do it? You can go elsewhere, you can go to another part of the world and move your investment there. Roads are the only primary lifeline which remain. But the way we have built many of these roads, that is where we've gone wrong. There was a point of time when we had, well, of course, climate change is here. We are seeing it. It's a part of our lives. But that having been said, there was a point when the roads had stabilized. This two-laning, the double lane which we had stabilized. You had a little landslide cleared up, but we never had blockages of the scale which we are seeing now. It could have been handled more, I would say, with a greater level of sensitivity, without looking at simply that I have to build a road. I'll give you one small example. It's not a road example, it's a railway example. When the Kangra Valley Railway was built, the railway was built only from Joginder Nagar to be able to take electricity to Lahore. That was the only purpose of that railway line being built. But the engineers, they built the line in such a way that it would be aesthetic, it would enhance the views, and it would not create damage on the landscape. So for what was primarily just a means of getting material from point A to point B, but they did it in an aesthetic way without sort of dismissing the terrain, as it were. Coming to your second question. One may not like it, one may not wish to admit it, and despite the enormous advances Himachal has made in so many fields, digressing a little, you know, Himachal is perhaps one of the few states where there's a negative population growth rate. The growth rate in Himachal of population is 1.4 compared to what you need to sustain population, which is 2.1, because they're deaths. You need to have that just to keep the status quo. Part of this is migration, part of that is migration, and another part of that is the birth rate is falling in Himachal. Prosperity has also brought a decrease in birth rate. But now, these are all interlinked. That prosperity has not affected the caste. It is prevalent, like it or not, it is very much there, especially in the rural areas. We have had a terrible case of where this young Dalit child has, because he went somewhere and he was told that your family has to give a goat in sacrifice because you are a scheduled caste boy, you've entered this area, you've defiled it. So tell your family to give a goat to sort of offset the defiling which you've committed. Now that young child, he knew his parents could not afford a goat. He was so shattered, he didn't know how to deal with it. He committed suicide. It's a 12-year-old child where caste has impacted to that level. This is, I actually sometimes think that the greatest social evil in Hinduism remains till today is the presence of caste. Like it, don't like it, unfortunately, it still exists, it still has not gone away.
One more question?
Yeah.
Rahul.
Yeah, Jelly, you mentioned that the temperature in Himachal and the Himalayas have gone up by 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now there's nothing very much that we can do about it. It's worldwide, isn't it?
No, what is happening in the Himalayan region is basically, according to, is that it is going up, the temperature here is going up 1.5 times that of the average. Yeah. What you can do, and this is one of the things which ISIMOD is doing, is saying how can we deal with this? So there are steps in mitigation.
That was my question.
Yes, there are. There are steps in mitigation to help with reforesting, and this is one of the aims. It's a long progress, but this is what ISIMOD is all about. And one of the things also you can do, bearing in mind that disasters will happen, is to monitor more on the ground. We are doing remote sensing from space, but we need many more where you have sensitive hillsides, where you have glacial lakes, which may burst at any stage. You need to put sensors there, you need to monitor, so that if there will be disasters in the future, it doesn't come as a surprise. So there are two things. There's mitigation and there's proper monitoring. These are two things that can be done.
I've got the mic.
You spoke of many factors, but you didn't speak about trees and foliage. So is that also being used to mitigate climate? Is it, this whole business of monoculture which is coming in? You cut down trees and you pretend that you're transplanting, or you transplant trees or you cut them down. So how much attention is being paid to the forest cover as a means of mitigating so many of this?
I tell you one problem which I still think, unless it has been solved very recently in the last year or so, is that we have the remote sensing which does the forest for the whole of India, but this is meant, according to court orders, to be geotagged. And until everything is properly geotagged, we don't exactly know exactly what forests we have. But naturally, and you will talk also about trees, because your book has a lot about nature.
So again, this is something we don't realize. The Himalayan topsoil is only about 3 inches thick. That's all there is. That's our topsoil here. So the tree cover and the grass cover, now here and the natural topography of the land, sometimes we look at a slope and we think that this is deforestation. It isn't. These are alpine to temperate climate trees which are growing, which at least latitudinally is a tropical zone. They grow here is simply because of the altitude. The result of that is that the forests, the real forests, are on the north faces. The leeward, windward business, that the cool winds coming down from the snows, protected by the sharp tropical sun rays, is that they have the forests. The southern slopes normally have open grasslands. But yes, the trees have been cut down. For example, when the hill stations were being built, if you look at the early photographs of any of the hill stations, there are no trees. All the trees have been cut down to build the houses. The trees come in later. So it's not that that the trees were removed, were always there. They weren't. A lot of this has actually, 1882 is when the first forest working plans come in for Shimla. So that's when the tree cover starts rising. Then again, it goes down and comes up again.
Right, this is the point where we get dragged off the stage.
No, so I think we'll just take 2 more questions.
Just one.
We'll take 2 more questions if
okay,
that's
fine.
with you.
So, Mr. Bhasin, rightly, I'm from Tribune. I'm Ambika Sharma. I look after this area and have been covering the highway extensively, which also includes the problems which have been cropping up. So, Mr. Bhasin rightly talked about reckless constructions, harming the environment. But I would like to convey that there is something more sinister happening to the hills. Like, there are some villages which have totally crumbled in Nalagarh and Doon area, the area. The hilly area.
Which are there in Batti and Nalagarh. So no construction has
been taking place there, and there is no anthropological activity there. Despite that, something sinister is happening. So I think we need to delve into what is happening. More ecological explorations need to take place, and more importantly, when these highways are constructed, there is this environment impact assessment which is done. But sadly, this has just been reduced to a cursory exercise. No real exploration or understanding of the impact these highways will have has been done.
So the bottom line comes down, greater study you need to have, and yes, the studies have to be neutral. Very often, as I've seen, the study, you have already reached your conclusion, and then your study proceeds to justify that conclusion. That is where we need a proper study from.
So I'm a Punjabi. I'm a doctor living in Solon since 2 years, and I just want to say that a state that banned polythenes 30 years ago still allows single-use plastics the way it does. Even in a literary festival, any shop you go to, it's filled with those small plastic bottles. It's a global catastrophe, but its joke hills more, I believe.
I still, whenever my wobbly legs allow me to do it, I still trek as much as I can. And I hate to admit it, which was once a clear stream is today a nala full of plastic bag, chips, and gutka packets. It's there.
Hi, can I interrupt, please?
Just want to tell you, KSLF is a green fest. So all our plastic bottles are going to be collected here at the club on Monday or Tuesday morning. They will be all taken back for recycling. So there is no plastic waste. Thank you.
Right, can I declare the session closed now?
I think it's very important to keep continuing, but
I wish we could. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And they've been, at least I've seen you many number of times at the fest, and I think that's the best thing of it. And Raja Sahab, I think many more treks we shall plan with you. Thank you so much. And before we head off for lunch and then right back here again for post-lunch sessions, can I quickly call upon Major General Ajay Mishra and Shyamanjali? They have been another big supporters of the KSLF, and Nilofer and Rahul would like to just give them a short token of appreciation for being here with us all the time and supporting the whole cause. Ajay, can I? Ajay, come. Ajay is just here.